Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtotara Shishimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravindra Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtotara Shishimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagwan Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Nashtapraya Shabadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 24, Text 11. Sabhajayan Vishuddhena Sabhajayan Vishuddhena Chetasa Tachikirshitam Chetasha Tachikirshitam Prahrishyamane Rashubhihi Prahrishyamane Rashubhihi Kardamam Chedamabhyada Kardamam Chedamabhyada Sabhajayan Vishuddhena Chetasa Tachikirshitam Prahrishyamane Rashubhihi 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 Kardamam Chedamabhyada Mataji Sabhajayan Vishuddhena Chetasa Tachikirshitam Praharishyamane rashbihi Kardamam chedamabhyadat. Word to word translation. Please repeat. Sabhajayan, worshipping. Vishuddhena, pure. Chetasha, with the heart. Tat, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chikirshitam, the intended activities. Prahasyamanahi, gladdened. Asubhihi, with senses. Kardamam, to Kardamamuni. Cha, and Devahuti. Idam, this. Abhyadat, spoke. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanaravinda, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation. After worshipping the Supreme Lord with gladdened senses and a pure heart for His intended activities as an incarnation, Brahma spoke as follows to Kardama and Devahuti. Purport. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, anyone who understands the transcendental activities, the appearance and disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is to be considered liberated. Brahma, therefore, is a liberated soul. Although he is in charge of this material world, he is not exactly like the common living entity. Since he is liberated from the majority of the follies of the common living entities, he was in knowledge of the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he therefore worshipped the Lord's activities, and with a glad heart he also praised Kardama Muni, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Kapila had appeared as his son. One who can become the father of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is certainly a great devotee. There is a verse spoken by a Brahmana in which he says that he does not know what the Vedas and what the Puranas are. But while others might be interested in the Vedas or Puranas, he is interested in Nanda Maharaj, who appeared as the father of Krishna. The Brahmana wanted to worship Nanda Maharaj because the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a child crawled in the yard of his house. These are some of the good sentiments of devotees. If a recognized devotee brings forth the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son, how he should be praised. Brahma, therefore, not only worshipped the incarnation of Godhead Kapila, but also praised his so-called father, Kardama Muni. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pad Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Kankaroti Vachalam Pangumlanga Tegrim Yatkrupatamaham Mande Shri Gurun Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanyeshwaram Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. I'll read the translation again. After worshipping the Supreme Lord with gladdened senses and a pure heart for his intended activities as an incarnation, Brahma spoke as follows to Kardama and Devahuti. Chapter title, Renunciation of Kardama Muni. Hare Krishna. The Supreme Lord as Lord Kapiladev had appeared from the womb of Mother Devahuti. And here we see different personalities, they come and worship him. A similar scene you may recollect literally in the appearance of the Supreme Lord in every incarnation. You take Prithu Maharaj, you will see many personalities, they come and worship him. When Krishna, as Swayam Bhagavan, when he is appearing, you will see he is worshipped by different demigods. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, you see a same etiquette that's actually followed by the denizens of the higher planetary system. And so do we see a similar scene in Vamanadev's appearance as well. So whenever the Supreme Lord appears, it's not an ordinary thing. It is an occasion worthy of celebration. But then Prabhupada, when you read the purport, first point Prabhupada makes is from the verse in 4th chapter, Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam, Yavam Yavati Tattvataha, Tyaktva Deham Punarjanma, Naiti Mameti So Arjuna. Once someone asks Srila Prabhupada in a class, when Prabhupada opens the floor for questions, Srila Prabhupada, are you a pure devotee? Some random person. Prabhupada says, I can tell you I'm a pure devotee, but do you know how to recognize a pure devotee? So in order to even recognize, you need to be qualified. I remember when I was young, I was once watching a boxing match between Mike Tyson and I think Evander Holyfield. And my brother was actually telling, do you know how much the winner of this contest would get? He said something like $80-90 million. I was like, wow, so much. Then he told me, do you know how much the loser gets in this? Then he told me something like 30-40. Then I said, that's very easy. I don't mind getting punched if they are going to give me 30-40. But he told me, in order for you to be even enrolled for the contest, you should have won so many other people. So sometimes it's very easy to question, can you show me God, or can you prove that there is God? Prabhupada would often challenge, I can show you, but do you have the eyes to see? So here also, in order to even recognize the position of the Supreme Lord, Prabhupada says only liberated souls can do so, or do it. Prabhupada says in one place, we cannot practice bhakti in the mode of, interestingly, Prabhupada says, you cannot practice bhakti in the mode of passion, ignorance. Prabhupada says as well as in mode of goodness. We cannot practice bhakti. In order to practice bhakti, Prabhupada says you have to come to Shuddha Sattva platform. In pure goodness only, we can practice bhakti. Prabhupada says in pure goodness only, we can understand Krishna. But how can we come to the platform of pure goodness? Prabhupada says by doing devotional service. When we keep on doing devotional service, have you got that experience? Sometimes you do something for Krishna, and sometimes this thought crosses your mind that I've never put so much effort in doing something so simple, but because this is for Krishna, you put so much energy. It can be anything, can be cooking. You rewind back your life and you think, how many times in your karmi life, first of all, you cooked something. Normally, when you are a karmi, you will cook, you will just eat straight from the cooking pot. How many of you have done that? Tasting while you're cooking is part of the process, correct? So we think, you just eat directly from there. What's the point in eating, washing a plate? Or you just serve, even with the muchi hands. But then when we come to Krishna consciousness, even if you are staying outside, you go to some devotee's home, if you look at the amount of details they care, they take into consideration for serving. I went to one home, they have a separate kitchen for the Supreme Lord. And they told me, this is deity kitchen. I'm like, good. Sounds familiar. So in some homes, it's like that. Even if they don't have that facility, you will see devotees will have separate cooking pots in some places, obviously separate plates for Krishna. So everyone wants to give the best for Krishna. So all of those, you can actually say they are symptoms of pure goodness, because this is not something which we would naturally do. It's not something which we have figured out ourselves when we were karmis until we came to Krishna consciousness. But then, even without us realizing, we are slowly put in that position. But then again, we'll come down to behold our mystic opulence. Again, we'll come down to mode of passion and ignorance. But still, when we get the opportunity to do service, we can take a moment to contemplate it, to think about, yes, this is in mode of pure goodness. Dancing around the Tulsi Marani, you never do. Correct? In India, maximum you look at Tulsi Marani, you say like, okay, maybe this is Tulsi. That's maximum how much we think. Most of the times we don't even. If we don't know, they say like, why are they offering flowers, okay? Why a green leaf? We may even think about it quizzically and we'll just walk past without even considering much. So practicing bhakti, Prabhupada says it's possible only in mode of pure goodness. We can still practice bhakti in other levels, but Prabhupada says we cannot understand Krishna. If we want to understand Krishna, if we want to develop bhakti for Krishna, then our devotional service has to come from wherever it started, no problem. It can start from Tamaguna. I remember one family I was preaching to, and they were asking me to teach about, this is like maybe 10-15 years ago, about everything about Krishna consciousness, so I was telling them. Then the question came about coffee, tea. I said like, we don't take coffee, tea. Then they said, fine. One day I went to the program, there were like a lot of people, and they had already offered Bhoga to the Lord. Class has already finished. I just went to the program, finished the class, then I asked, should we do Bhoga offering? They said like, no, we already did it. Then I said like, fine. Then there was like Bhoga. Then I said like, okay, let's take it and serve. They said like, no. This is for others, and this one they have separated a certain portion. This is for us. I said like, why you? He's like, well, we are still habituated to drinking coffee, so we have offered milk to Krishna, and in that offered milk we added coffee for ourselves. Same way with food also, we are still attached to onion and garlic, so we created onion and we added separate. So this is separate for us, and that is for devotees. We still try to. They are initiated devotees now. So I can share the story. Point we have to understand is, opportunity whenever we get to practice bhakti in the purest way, we should try to seize that opportunity. We should try to hold on to that opportunity, so that it may influence our other walks of other things that we actually do in life. Not that we separate Krishna away from rest of our life and say like, okay, Krishna, this much is for you, everything is for me. Krishna is very demanding. Tasmad sarveshu kaleshu. Krishna never says, think about me only in the morning. Think about me when you come to temple. Think about me when you go to bed. Think about me only when you have difficulties. No. Tasmad sarveshu kaleshu. Krishna is saying, always mam anushmara yudhyacha. You always think of me and then you fight. This is what Krishna is saying. So here, whoever who had done devotional service, whoever who is in pure goodness, they can understand Janma Karma Chame Divyam. Prabhupada says, such a person is a liberated soul, Brahma is a liberated soul. Brahma's whole body is made of intelligence. Our body is made of Panchabhuta. Brahma doesn't have any tinge of any other material qualities. So here, his intelligence is also spiritualized. So Prabhupada says, since he is liberated from the majority of the follies of the common living entities, he was in knowledge of the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he therefore worshipped the Lord's activities and with a glad heart. Very important. I'll read the translation again. After worshipping the Supreme Lord with gladdened senses, prahirshyamanahi, gladdened senses. It's one thing to just do bhakti. Why? Because I'll suffer, I better do bhakti. That's one way of approaching bhakti. Another way of approaching bhakti is, everyone is doing, so I'm doing. Yet another way is, my authorities or some other devotee who preached to me, they told me so, that's why I'm doing. But you look at how Brahma is practicing bhakti, prahrishyamanaihi. With gladdened. Brahma fully understands his position. Brahma fully relishes serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada, he says, Paramahamsas means somebody in the highest platform. Even in sannyasis, you will come across 4 levels. Who remembers that? 4 stages of sannyas. Kutichaka, Bahudaka, Parivrajaka, Paramahamsa. So normally when somebody goes from Vanaprastha stage, they are still with the family. When they leave their family, they can't quit everything and go straight away. So there has to be some kind of temporary arrangement. So it's called Kutichaka. Kutichaka means from wherever they are actually living in their village or town, they would go away from their family. And they would make a small bhajan kutir and they will just stay there alone. And the villages, or sometimes even family members, they may come and give some food and they go. That's the only connection they would have. So that's why it's called Kutichaka. Then when they are a bit more advanced, when they are advanced in renunciation, then they will go to the next stage, which is Bahudaka. Bahu is many, so then they'll go to many homes and they will beg alms. That's the second stage. Third stage is Parivrajaka. That's when they start to travel. Fourth stage is Paramahamsa. Prabhupada says Paramahamsa means somebody who is totally away from the bodily consumption of life. Now Prabhupada says, we may think, what is the joy in renouncing everything? Renunciation means here Parivrajaka or Paramahamsa, he renounces everything. Prabhupada says on the strength of his or her relishing the service of Krishna. They come to a stage wherein they are totally indifferent to the presence of their body, and each of their senses, it gets enlivened simply by serving the Supreme Lord, simply by remembering the Supreme Lord. So here we see Brahma is actually serving Krishna with gladdened senses. Morning, have you got that experience? You wake up, eyes are tired, body may be little awake. Eyes are tired. Or sometimes in the evening, mind will be very tired. Senses also may be, mentally you may be completely exhausted. So we all have that experience with senses going through the tiredness. But what does bhakti do? If we do it with the pure heart, Prabhupada says, and with the glad heart, he also praised Kardama Muni. Senses, we have to understand, everything that we have in this world is borrowed from others. We'll read that later when we discuss about the nitty-gritties of Sankhya Yoga. When we die, our body is cremated. Do you know why it's cremated? Prabhupada explains that when this body is formed, we have actually borrowed from different elements. Like our Prabhupada says, our body has got different elements. Like there's earth component in the body. Prabhupada says like flesh, skin, they're all earth. Water component also. Blood, perspiration. Likewise, there is air. There is fire also in the body. So in this way, Prabhupada says there are different ingredients that we have borrowed from this planet to make this body. And when we die, we have to return back to each one of those personalities from whom we borrowed. And Bhagavatam explains different personalities who are in charge for each of those elements. Fire. Or let me take a step back. Even if we go by senses, sense of sight, who did we borrow from? Take a guess. Which demigod? Somebody said? Sun god, Surya. Yes. Sense of hearing. That's a little difficult. We'll come to the end. Sense of taste. Have you read this book, Salted Bread? When your mouth is dry, you cannot actually taste anything. Have you got that experience? Normally, when you are so tired, hungry also, thirsty also, and a plate of food comes in front, do you think you will immediately dive down and gulp the food? You won't do it. Or devour on the food? You won't. First, you would want to drink a glass of water because unless the tongue is wet, we can't taste anything. So, sense of taste comes from who? Varuna. Sense of sight, Surya, which is borrowed. Sense of taste is borrowed from Varuna. Sense of smelling. Okay, closer. Sense of smelling. If I give you a hint, you will easily say it. Twin demigods. Ashwini Kumaras, 2 nostrils. Okay, so it comes from Ashwini Kumaras. So they are the demigods in charge of sense of smelling, touching. Vayu, wind. You can actually sense the touch. Okay, now coming back, hearing. When you hear, when I'm actually speaking from this direction, that direction, back, north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. Irrespective of whichever direction I actually speak, you will still hear, correct? So who is in charge for hearing? Digbalas. The demigods who are in charge, Maruts, they also come under. Who are in charge for the directions. They are the ones who are in charge for sense of hearing. It's given. Now let's go to subtle sense. Mind. Moon god, good. Chandra. Intelligence. Sorry, what? Buddha, okay. Brahma. Intelligence is Brahma. Ego, this is easy. Come on. Who? Shiva, Rudra. So when we die, when our body is cremated, it's mentioned each one of these, power of these different senses is actually handed over to each of these different faculties. So Prabhupada says, when we think this is our body, we have to understand this body doesn't belong to us. This body is actually borrowed. Now why this understanding is important is, generally you think about it, right? Imagine you have borrowed a car, you don't have a car. You borrowed it from someone. For the purpose you are saying, I want to drive the car to buy milk for Gopinath. You say that, devotees will easily give. Don't try it. Devotees will easily give. Oh, this is for Gopinath's service. You take it. You will naturally feel obliged to use the car only for that purpose, correct? Because you know, it's on this promise, this trust that I have actually borrowed it. It's on this trust that the owner of the car had given me the key to use. If only you had told them, just give me a car. Why? I don't know, I just want to go for a drive. Do you ever think anyone would give? Nobody will. But the moment we are conscious, why we actually received, from where we received, we will use it only for that purpose. Same way, we have to understand this body has been borrowed from many personalities, not just one. Next time we look at something which is not in accordance with the Vedic scriptures, we have to understand this is Surya Dev. At any time, it can go away. One of Prabhupada's disciples, he had told me that personally. He said to Prabhupada, I feel very lusty when he was very young. Prabhupada says, watch out, otherwise you'll lose your sense of sight. Because eyes, when you start to misuse it, then the power of seeing will be taken away. Same way, sense of hearing. If we start, Prabhupada says we should not be reading any mundane literature. Why? It will only simply agitate the mind. So Prabhupada says, whoever who is serious in practice of bhakti should strictly avoid. But these days, they just easily make it to Facebook. Facebook sounds very innocent. But everything comes there. You don't even need to play. You scroll, movie starts to play. Slowly everything will come there. So everything is prajalpa. So Prabhupada says, already mind is agitated. This one, it simply agitates more. Once they bring Prabhupada a copy of Time magazine, Prabhupada would often say, I want Back to God magazine to be circulated, to be made in the quality of Time magazine, so it has worldwide circulation. So many people can read. And Prabhupada, they brought a copy. So Prabhupada was flipping through it. After some pages, Prabhupada closes and he pushes to the other end of the table he was seated close to, and he pushes and he says, nobody should ever read these magazines because they have presented everything in such a way to make material world to be so real. Prabhupada says nobody should be reading because that's what, subtly what it does is it programs our consciousness that everything is fine. This is how the reality is supposed to be. So the more we read mundane literatures, Prabhupada says more our mind will get agitated, we will lose the frequency of Krishna consciousness and we will get dragged down. What platform are we supposed to practice bhakti in? Shuddha Sattva. Definitely reading mundane literature will start from mode of passion only. Forget about goodness. It will start from passion, it will drag us even down. That's why we need to stay away. Radhanath Maharaj says, once they asked Srila Prabhupada in those days, when telex machines, very old machines, when they were famous, they were like the most trendiest gadget, so to speak. Then they asked Prabhupada, how about having telex gadget in all ISKCON centers? So then we can communicate it very easily rather than going by snail mail, which is the normal postal mail. Can we install in every center? Prabhupada says, okay, we'll install telex machine, and then what? You will do Prajalpa, and somebody in the other end will do Prajalpa. You will only do Prajalpa quicker. So Prabhupada says it's not needed. What to speak of smartphone, internet, Facebook? Of course, everything has its purpose, but how much of the purpose is actually served by the use of these gadgets? Tiny, very, very tiny, negligible. It's actually not even indispensable, to be honest. Okay, we were practicing Krishna consciousness, at least I can say, when I started practicing, there was like, smartphone was slowly in the market. I started practicing before even iPhone came to market. There was no smartphone. Nokia 3315, have you heard about it? That was my phone, brick phone. So, it is possible to practice bhakti, and many, at least you look back at ISKCON, before ISKCON you look, thousands and thousands of years ago, since time immemorial, people were practicing bhakti without any of this. But in the name of Yukta Vairagya, we let each one of these agents come in and then they drag us down. Prabhupada says mind is already agitated, it will drag us down from mode of pure goodness to passion, worst, even ignorance. So each one of these senses we have to understand, they are borrowed from others. Just like when we borrow an object or anything from others for a certain purpose, how careful we are, that's how careful we should be in using this body. Same way, sense of smell, sense of tasting. Sense of tasting, we have to be very careful. The whole idea of cooking, I'll take a step back. When we came to Krishna consciousness, we all were very enthusiastic to give up our old ways so we can practice bhakti purely, and we even took a certain amount of pride. Yes, I'm able to give up this. Coffee tea was the last thing I thought I'll give up. When I gave up, I still remember, I have given up. I still remember the day when I actually gave up using feeding bottle when I was a child. I still remember that. Everyone in my home, I live in a joint family, everyone clapped. Yes, finally, I was in, I think, UKG or something, upper kindergarten. It was quite late, but I was the last one to give up in my family. So you still remember, and you take a certain amount of pride. Yes, I have given up. But then what happened? Complacency seeps in. Same thing which we felt so happy giving up. Now after we become complacent in Krishna consciousness, we feel, we can stretch the borders more. Okay, we gave up coffee, let us make a dish or let us make a drink which would go as close to coffee as possible. And we feel a certain sense of achievement. Rebellion only, correct? Tea, we have given up, we don't even want to stand. No, let us actually go, stretch it as close as possible. Let's stretch the boundary to make it taste exactly like the tea. But then in all of this process, what do? We lose our consciousness. Correct? We don't even realize. Meat we have given up. These days with soy, they make it, smells like it, tastes like it. Some food you can't even bring it in the name of prasad, mind you. So we have to be very careful. The whole process of bhakti, how does Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explain? The difference between our own lust and love. Atmendriya priti vanche dare bali kama. Krishnendriya priti icha tare prema nama. He says if we use all the senses for our own gratification, Atmendriya priti, gratifying one's own senses is called lust, gratifying Krishna's senses is called love. Gratifying one's own senses is kama, gratifying Krishna's senses is prema. Same, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam, Bhakti Ruchate. Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam, Tat Paratvena Nirmalam. So, the whole purpose of practicing bhakti is to please Krishna, not to enjoy a sense of rebellion. In all of this process, we just give ourselves a pat on the back. See how much I'm enjoying, but we lose the point. The whole point here of cooking anything, remember, there are devotees who have dedicated kitchen in their homes. Is it possible? It is possible. When you build a home, it's just, we design for so many things. But they genuinely made that effort to keep, no, this is for Krishna. Some devotees' homes you go, you'll find a beautiful place they keep only for altar. Big, not like, 6-bedroom homes. An altar is just one tiny little cupboard. Shouldn't be. But we still say, we are building everything for Krishna. Krishna is in the center. Krishna may be in the center, but the size has to be proportional also. So it's very easy for us to cheat ourselves and be satisfied with, yes, I'm doing it very well. But actually speaking, here, as you can see, Brahma, with the gladdened heart, pure intelligence means we use intelligence only for the service of Krishna. When Narada Muni sees Manigrivan Nalakuvera, fully intoxicated, Nahiyanyo Jusato Dosyan, Buddhi Brahmsho, Rajogunaha, Srimadadapi Jatadir, Yatra Stri Dyutamashavaha. He says, we study in Kunti Maharani's prayers, there are 4 things that are predetermined even before we are born. Who knows that? Yeah? You know it. Janma, Aishwarya, Shruta, Shri. Janma means birth. Which family we are born? Predetermined. Aishwarya, wealth. How much wealth you will have in your life? Predetermined. Shri, beauty. How beautiful a person will be? Predetermined. You cannot change, no matter how much you try. Shruta, educated. How much intelligence a person or how much wisdom a person will have? Predetermined. So, Janma, Aishwarya, Shruta, Shri. Narada Muni says, of these 4 things which a person is born with, there's one thing which is the worst among these 4, which can make people feel most egoistic. Which is it? Srimadadapi Jata there. He says, wealth. Janma, Aishwarya, Shruta, Shri. Janma, Shruta, Shri doesn't make one so proud, so puffed up as much as wealth. He says, of the 4 things, wealth is the one which pushes one to become Sri Madad. It makes one feel more maddened. I was thinking, why is he saying only one? More maddened. If you look at your education, right? You may go around, with your puffed up attitude, showing off to only a certain section of people. It won't appeal to so many people, correct? So, likewise, beauty. Likewise, great aristocratic family. Even as we speak now, there are still some royal families. How many of us are interested? There are some people who will be very devoted. They'll be following the news, everything. When some royal member dies, everyone cries because they feel so much in connection with them. Nothing wrong in it. But it just appeals to only a certain kind of people. Likewise, somebody born in a rich family, they'll always be in news and somebody will be very closely following. But wealth, it attracts everyone. Not only that, even for the possessor of wealth, their mind thinks with wealth they can actually get everything else. Whereas if you take education, or you take beauty, or you take janma, the amount of facilities or the avenues for them to feel proud is quite limited compared to somebody possessing wealth. Wealth means Jitam sarvam jiterase. They think they have gotten everything. So Narada Muni says, wealth actually puffs up one so much that it puts one in extreme maddened condition. But then you fast forward, he curses them, and then Krishna comes, liberates Manigriva and Nalakuvera. Finally, when they offer prayers to Krishna, they offer one beautiful prayer, Manigriv and Nalakuver. It's almost very similar to Ambarish Maharaj's verse, Savai Mana Krishna Padaravindayor. How Ambarish Maharaj had engaged each of his different senses. And you'll come across a similar verse in other places of the Shastras also, like Sthiti Seva Gatriyatra Smitistinta Stutir Vachaha. May my every action be devotional service. May every word that I speak be in word of glorification. May every step that I actually take be that of pilgrimage, like that. It's part of the Aparada Shodhana prayers also we sing every time we do deity service. So, the difference between the glorification that's given for Ambarish Maharaj and the verse that is actually spoken by Manikriva Nalakuvera, Kayena Vacha Manasendriyarva Buddhyatmana, you will see that in Vishnu Sahasranam also. So, similar verse, the verse that is spoken by Manikriva Nalakuvera, unlike for Ambarish Maharaj, it is said as a description, which means he is already doing it. For Manikriva Nalakuvera, they'll come in front of Krishna, circumambulate him, and they make a sankalpa. Sankalpa means promise. Vani gunanu katane shravanau katayam hastau chakarmasu manas tava padayorna smritis. How does it go? Vani gunanu katane shravanau katayam hastau chakarmasu manas tava padayorna drishti satam. He says that Vani gunanu katane, may our tongue be engaged in the glorification of your activities. Vani gunanu katane shravanav, may our ears be engaged in hearing about your glories. Hastaucha karmashu, may every activity that we do with our limbs be devotional service. Manas tava padayorna, may our mind be always be engaged in meditating on your lotus feet. Like that it goes. And then they say drishti satam, which is very relevant to this verse. They say, may our eyes, normally when we see in Ambarish Maharaj, we actually see he is perfecting his eyes by how? Lingane darshane drisho, it's given, that by looking at the murti form. But interestingly, Manikriva and Nalakuvera, they say drishti satam. May our eyes be purified by taking darshan of your pure devotees. So, every sense being engaged in the service of the Lord. For Brahma, it is given, he is doing it with gladdened senses because he has got each of his senses engaged in service of the Lord. For Brahma, Prabhupada actually explains here, he is not only glorifying the Supreme Lord, who else is he glorifying here? He is glorifying Kardama Muni and Devahuti as well. Drishti Satam. Manikriva and Nalakuvera also saying, they are making the sankalpa, may our eyes be purified simply by taking darshan of your pure devotees. May each of our senses be engaged in glorifying you, somehow or other connected to you. And that's the only way how we can be convinced that we are practicing bhakti, or at least attempting to practice bhakti in Suddha Sattva platform. Otherwise, we always tend to do just the bare minimum, which will always be in mode of passion. One problem with doing everything in mode of passion is we can't focus on the quality. Have you got that experience? You study for the exam the night before the exam. And as soon as you give the test next day, how much of what you read the previous night do you remember? Nothing much, correct? You chant Hare Krishna in a half sleepy mood. How much of quality can you focus on? Nothing much. When you have any service, cooking for example, if the cooking is supposed to be ready at 9 o'clock, you start it late. What will your focus be? Your focus will simply be in finishing the service on time, correct? Not so much on improving the taste or improvising the taste as you cook. So same way in our bhakti, if we practice bhakti in mode of passion, the problem is there will never be any opportunity for us to improve the quality. Becomes very difficult. Whereas, if you look at how Brahma is doing, Prabhupada explains here, after worshipping the Supreme Lord with gladdened senses and a pure heart for his intended activities as an incarnation. So, two things Prabhupada is saying. How is his chitta, consciousness, and how is his senses? Senses are feeling very enlivened, each one of the senses. When he looks at the Lord, he is feeling very gladdened. Duryodhana also looked at the Lord. Ravan also looked at the Lord. Kamsa also looked at the Lord. But is that the description we see? When they looked at it. Shishupal, Hiranyakashipu. So we may be thinking, Brahma, he looked at the Lord, so it's natural that he becomes gladdened. No, there are still examples of people who never felt gladdened. When Mukunda Datta was once banished, apparently, by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because Mukunda Datta was very, very liberal. He would go hear katha everywhere. Sometimes even tinged with Mayavad, they'll speak, he'll still be there, because he wants to be in the good books of everyone. So one day Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, I don't want to see Mukunda anymore. Then Mukunda gets very sad. Devotees come and appeal on behalf of Mukunda Datta. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, no, I won't see him he won't see me for next 10 million births. When they go and break open the news to Mukunda Datta, he starts to dance. Then they say, hey, did you hear it right? 10 million births. He said, like, no problem, but I'll still be able to see Chaitanya after 10 million births. That's why I'm dancing now. So he dances. Then when they come and tell to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu smiles, he says, all right, let him in. Like that. When he comes, if you read the words of his glorification, he says, my Lord, what is the use of seeing you when our heart is not pure? Even Kamsa saw Krishna. So many people, even Kamsa actually went all the way to even Vrindavan. And he was then stopped by Paurnamashi. He was given a gopi body. And the contest to go, we'll hear from Dinabandhu Prabhu soon. And the contest for somebody to be let into Vrindavan is, they should show their expertise about how nicely they can make patty with Kaudang. So then he tries to do, it keeps on falling. Then they reject him. You are rejected. You cannot be a gopi. Get lost. Then he goes back actually to Mathura. So Mukunda Datta says, so many people have seen you. But what is the use of their seeing? Unless you give us the eyes to see you. Unless our consciousness is actually pure rather. How much can we actually see you? So here, he had both. His senses are pure and his senses became gladdened, unlike the senses of the demoniac personalities. So when we come in front of the Lord, if we don't feel enthusiastic, that means we have the tamoguna on us. So we should quickly shred it off and we say, no, we are following Brahma Madhav Gaudiya Sampradaya. When we have to follow Brahmaji, even in this. And a pure heart. For his intended activities as an incarnation, Brahma spoke as follows to Kardama and Devahuti. I'll finish with this point. If a recognized devotee brings forth the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son, how he should be praised? Brahma, therefore, not only worshipped the incarnation of Godhead Kapila, but also praised his so-called father. Prabhupada, why he says so-called father is, normally when we say we are fathered by someone, we don't choose our father. Correct? Whereas for Krishna's case, or Supreme Lord, Krishna chooses his father. Despite Krishna being the father of his father. Correct? Aham bija pradapita means he is the father of even Nanda Baba. He is the father of Kardama Muni also. So that's why Prabhupada uses, also praised his so-called father. So-called father means not ordinary father, but the father of the Supreme Lord, the father of the Supreme Lord chosen by the Supreme Lord. I'll finish here. Any questions or comments? Okay, so the question here is, when you look at the origin of mind and intelligence. Narada Muni explains that the origin of mind is in sattva, from mode of goodness, and intelligence is mode of passion. But generally we tend to think it's the opposite way, correct? We think mind is very passionate, and intelligence, normally it's very sadhu. That's what we think. Mind, it's related to Rajoguna, or rather Sattva Guna, because one of the qualities of Sattva Guna is it maintains things at a certain level. Passion is not like that. If you take Sattva Guna, you can even observe some people. They'll be very, very regulated. They'll do everything exactly at the same time. They'll have a certain a bare minimum quality, which they'll always sustain. All the time you will see. It won't be wavering so much. Mind is actually given that connection with mode of goodness because of all the senses. We study Indriyani Paranyahur, Indriyabhya Param Manaha, Manasastu Parabuddhir, Yo Buddhe, Parasastu Sa. Of all these senses are considered to be greater than the body, greater than the senses are the mind. Greater than mind is intelligence, and greater than intelligence is the soul. Even though, if you look at mind, in the whole hierarchy, topmost is the soul, next to that is intelligence, third only is mind. Still, the mind is capable of superseding everyone else. Mind is capable of controlling the senses, which is the normal hierarchy. Mind is capable of superseding the lazy intelligence, which is the case for most of us all the time, or maybe all of us all the time. Our intelligence is very lazy. If you think about how often do we process before we speak something? Process means not just thinking a little bit. Process means satyam, hitam, priyam. Whatever we speak has to be truthful. Whatever that we speak has to be pleasing. Whatever that we speak has to be beneficial. Do we really process when we speak? No. If you look at how often we use our intelligence, even before we eat, when you look at a menu, what is the first thing you think about? Is it healthy? Definitely not. Correct? What is the most tastiest? At least this is how my mind works. What is it that I can eat more? Shh, keep quiet. You have to catch yourself. Correct? What is it that is very rare today? Something which you normally don't get. Okay, typical psychology. This is how it goes. So if you look at how actively we think, how actively we use our intelligence, very minimal. This is something on a gross level. Can you imagine, to take every step towards Krishna, how much more thinking we are supposed to do? How much more we should condition ourselves so we practice Krishna consciousness as our second nature. Actually, it's not even our second nature. This is our original nature. But we are not even able to practice bhakti as our second nature. Because mind just looks for opportunity. Mind is a very powerful servant. Only problem is, mind is a very powerful servant only for a powerful master. If the master is weak, mind takes over. So of all the senses, if we see, what is it that maintains us in this material world? It's the mind only. So, mind is said to be born of the mode of goodness. Likewise, if you look at passion, intelligence, generally anything you create in this world, you need to use intelligence. You don't create things accidentally. You don't create things impulsively. Sometimes you will see, people say, this thing was discovered accidentally. How often do you come across things which are discovered accidentally in your own life? How often have you done things accidentally for your own benefit?